And then all the sets before 2018 had just a blank minifigure face with just 2 eyes and a smile, except for
No, it's just blank.
yeah, just yellow, plain yellow, except for the Market Street, and that actually had just eyes and a smiley face. Or sorry, wow,
No, they did not just have eyes and
no.
smiley faces. They had mustaches and hair
Yes,
and everything
they
else.
had more of a design. There was only 3 minifigures in the Market Street, so
which is so funny.
yeah, but
Although
they weren't that decorated. So, but yes,
yeah, and Market Street was $90 because it's like half a modular. Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of 2 adult collectors. We are your co-host. I'm Grinch.
and I'm West.
And today we are doing part 1 of 2 of our Lego modular discussion. We were so excited about this topic that we decided we had to break it up into 2 parts before we even started. So before we get into that, though, West, how was your week? What are you building this week?
Grinch, it's been a long week. You can probably hear it in my voice a little bit. I didn't get a chance to build much Lego this week, but as I was explaining to you before we started recording, I've been on a bit of a saga to try to find the El Dorado Fortress set before it's completely sold out. And I made the mistake of not picking it up in the Lego store near me when I saw
Rookie
it last.
mistake.
I know. And I was like, I'm not mentally ready today to go pick it up. And so I didn't. And so I walked away from it. And now that it's like really sold out, the FOMO is kicking in hard. And I'm like, oh, I really need that set. So I have a scheme in place to hopefully get one tomorrow. I will update the listeners on our next episode if I pick that up for real. That'll be really exciting. But that's been my week in Lego. How about you?
I'm sorry, buddy. I was looking online and they're already, $50, $60 more than they were. So always stay on top of your retirement dates there.
I know. And this is a good lesson for not necessarily a lesson, but maybe like a good I'm a cautionary tale for the other AFOLs who are listeners. And if there's a set that you want and you're at the Lego store and you're about to walk away empty-handed and it's about to retire, just go get it. You won't be disappointed. If at the end of the day you're like, I didn't need to buy that, go and sell it.
Literally just hold on to it for like 6 months and then sell it, as Wes gets French kissed by his dog.
All right, Peanut.
Well, I built the Orient Express, or part of it. I just have the engine left to do, and I'm enjoying the build so far. I'm slightly disappointed with the sleeper car.
Yeah.
The whole sleeper car is essentially one room. And so I get it as a trade-off on like trying to smush as much space as possible into the sleeper car, right? I know scaling can be a challenge there, but for whatever reason, I thought there would be a little bit more than just like one kind of big room. And I know there's like a half room kind of towards the end of it, but I was just hoping for something more.
Yeah. This is funny because I built that set last year and I really liked it. And I think what I liked about it was not necessarily, it was still scale related, but I liked how much detail they were able to pack in that 8 wide medium. And I we've talked about it on the channel before. I think 8 wide for trains is kind of a good middle ground from the scale perspective. It's about 1:45, which we've talked about in the past is kind of a good Lego scale, right? It's kind of the scale that a lot of kind of AFOL train designers use. So that works really well. But as you've mentioned, you still kind of lose some of that detail, and it's almost impossible to really get those interiors right, just with the challenge of working in the Lego medium. So I did enjoy it myself, but I can totally understand from your perspective why it feels like, you know, just maybe could leave you wanting a little more. But
It's interesting that you like the 8 wide because I know a lot of the like pure train builders, mock train builders, anyways, will use 7 wide.
yeah, yeah, it's, I think at the end of the day, that 1 to 45 scale, or 1 to 40, or 1 to 48, anywhere between 7 and 8 wide, I think is kind of that ideal
Mm-hmm.
width for those trains. So I think it's a good starting point, but it's still, you still struggle with capturing the challenges of using a minifigure in the Lego medium are difficult, to be sure. If listeners will remember, and if they haven't or don't remember or didn't listen to the episode, we did have an episode on scale, and I just revisited it recently as we were exploring the Arc 170. I think that was on one of our first episodes this year, and kind of how that actually scales really well to a minifigure. But just to kind of very briefly recap, the widest part of the human body is your shoulders, but on the Lego minifigure, the widest part is at their hips, where their hands kind of go side by side. But on the human figure, your hands taper, your arms taper, and so really, the minifigure shouldn't be wider than 2 studs. And so, if anyone is trying to sort of scale things in a way that kind of gets you to a nice middle ground, kind of if you think about a 2 stud wide scale for like seats, or some sort of arrangement like that, I think that's a pretty good
Or the
compromise.
the doorway, for example.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, it gives you just enough. Your minifigure can kind of scoot through it if you need to, you know, uh, put them in that position or whatever. You want to make them look like they're moving or something inside. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, in my mind, you're kind of not losing things, right? So I think that makes sense to me. But you got to
Yeah.
find balance, right?
Well, for all about scale, head over to our episode on scale. But the other thing I was working on was reorganizing my Lego instructions. Since I moved, I built a lot of Lego, but I hadn't really organized it because I've been working on my Lego room and I just didn't get around to the instructions. And since I've been home and have some time to just kind of like set out a project and come and work on it piece by piece a little bit over the time, with the new baby, I was like, you know what, let's get the instructions all set out. So as
Yeah.
the listeners on YouTube can see, there's a big mess behind me. And shout out to our mother. Actually, she was visiting last week when I started working on this project. And I was like, oh, I'm doing my instructions. And she goes, oh, do you organize them by set number? And I was kind of like, what? You know about set numbers? Um, and I didn't actually. And so I've actually changed my methods to now. I used to have it by my own category. The
Yeah.
only problem with that is I had like a category for holiday or gift with purchase or promo or something like that. And then I had one for Marvel. And sometimes the lines can be so blurred as I was literally going through and taking all the instructions out. Like, for example, the Avengers Tower micro scale Avengers Tower gift with purchase from like 2018. I had that in gift with purchases, and I didn't have it with Age of Ultron, for example. And so set number just makes so much more sense because like there's literally, you can't dispute like
Yeah.
I'm looking for set 75093. Like that's between 75092 and 094. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's literally nowhere else it can be. So um just an update I've done. If you want to learn more on my methodology for sorting and storing instructions, I have a YouTube video on that on this channel. So
When I was going to tell the listeners that you created that YouTube video almost like a few months before we started recording our podcast last year.
mm-hmm.
And it's, I think, between that one and your sticker video that you also came out with right before we started recording, 2 of your best videos, in my opinion. I think they're really educational for the AFOL who is, has some specific questions about things like instructions or sticker applications. So for the listeners, those are some really great videos. And Grinch, they are on the AFOLs Welcome YouTube channel, correct?
That is correct.
So somebody can go back and actually see those and reference them. But I think by set number makes a lot of sense, actually. Kind of. I mean, it's not really by set number, right? You're ordering them sequentially,
Mm-hmm.
using the numbers, smallest to biggest, for example. But that does keep them all together because set numbers are generally, a theme generally has a series of numbers that they're given for that series, and then
It's kind of random. Like, yes, a lot of
right.
the
It's
brickheads
it's
are
a wave,
400,
right? It's a
but
wave.
then some of the are 4,000. Some of are sorry 40,000. Some of the brickheads randomly, like Star Wars, are either 40,000 or 7,500
Now,
or
is the
75,000.
7,000
Sorry,
is the 75,000 series the Star Wars series of instructions?
not exclusively. Some of the Star
Interesting.
Wars ones are also 40,000.
So it would be interesting to see too, then, to like break out all of the themes by set numbers to see if there's any connective tissue.
Yeah, Marvel is 76000 to like 76299.
Yeah.
But the latest set I have that's opened, and I haven't checked the 2025 ones yet because I haven't built any of them yet, was like 76292.
Yeah.
So like, but they can't go to 76300 because that's Harry Potter. So
Which is
I
funny
don't
too,
know.
because it's not an issue of like them running out of numbers or having already used that many numbers, because the icons Eldorado Fortress was 10,320.
Yeah. Yep.
So clearly there's numbers there that are still lower, that are like open and available, but Lego must have them like blocked off of and like set aside of like, we're gonna wait for this band of numbers for
There's
this
some
theme.
master plan out, some master recipe out there, right?
I just imagine some like old Danish, dude or
It's
or
behind a vault.
lady who's, yeah, just like sits back there and, like almost like a human calculator, and you're like, set 77
Taken.
289, and
Sorry,
they're like,
taken.
oh, that's the city set from 2012. Let me think, that was a red bus and it had 5 minifigures.
Well, you'd be incorrect because, as I know from today, city is 60.
Oh, well,
So
there you
sorry.
go.
And
Well,
the
that's
last
exciting.
thing I wanted to
Yeah.
touch on before we move to the news is I've also been working on my Valorant mock for Brickworld. And just as a tidbit to anybody out there who's mock building that doesn't know this, some people probably do. But if you're building on Bricklink Studio, just double check. I commonly see people say, like, why did Lego include 2 1x2s in place of a 1x4? And it's because it's cheaper, right? If they have 10 1x2s, it's cheaper than having 5 1x2s and 3 1x4s, or however the math fractions out to do that. And this is a perfect example. I'm building this mock and I'm using the 1x4 masonry brick, and it's literally $1.20 per brick. But the 1x2 dark tan masonry brick is 11 cents. So on my wish list on Bricklink, I've now literally just doubled all
Swapped
of the
them all out.
1x4s,
Yeah.
and just because it is 5 times cheaper.
Yeah, that's insane.
So always keep that in mind when you're using Bricklink.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
Well, with that tip, let's move over to some exciting Lego news. Exciting Lego news. Wes, take it away.
I'm still stuck on that excellent tip you just gave the audience.
A wonderful tip.
Yeah. Let's talk through some exciting Lego news. This week we had some really fun news. So Lego Jurassic World Rebirth dinosaurs were revealed, as well as a brief social media campaign by Lego showing a poster effectively from the new movie. We got the Bricklink Designer Program Series 4 pre-orders. Some of them are still up. They opened up, and some are still up, although some have already sold out. The Tropical Rainforest Gift with Purchase was revealed, It is available for a $150 spend and double VIP points this weekend from February 8th to 12th. We had official images of the Transformer Brickheads, Optimus Prime, and Bumblebee revealed. And then we got some very interesting news about Lego being sued by the corporation formerly known as Twitter for effectively not advertising on Twitter's platform. So, Grinch, what stood out to you in the news this week?
Um, we want free speech, but it has to be forced and on every platform, I guess. So that's all I'll say on that. Dumb lawsuit.
Yeah,
I hope you lose X.
pretty childish, to be frank. Which is
But
ironic because Lego's the toy company.
right. Well, it attracts children, I guess.
There you
Um,
go.
Lego Jurassic World Rebirth, dude. Did
Ooh,
you see the trailer?
I did. Oh, we were talking about this
Yeah,
before we started recording. The trailer looks actually really good.
I really like it. I've heard some people on the Jurassic World subreddit are like, man, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. This looks
Well,
good.
as you mentioned, it at least from what we saw in the trailer of what was revealed, you and I were talking about this, and I want to give you the credit. You pointed out that it actually kind of follows the storyline of the original Lost World
Book.
book written by Michael Crichton that was then adapted into the Lost World movie,
Mm-hmm.
which diverged from the book significantly. I mean,
Like
the
the
first,
only thing in common is that they go to the island.
yeah, the first Jurassic Park book and movie did have some changes, but there was, the overall structure of the story was still there. These definitely diverged, and so yeah, it's interesting to see just kind of some similar structural beats from that
Mm-hmm.
movie, which I don't mind coming from the last sequel or the last trilogy that really kind of started strong and then kind of lost its way.
Pretty quick.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
do you
I
think of the
agree.
dinosaurs?
I'm sad. I think they look good. Two new molds: the
Yeah,
Titanosaurus, and then the Spinosaurus. Let's go.
that is
Um,
so exciting.
it uses the Brachiosaurus mold for the Titanosaurus, but the head is a little bit different, and
Yeah.
then there's like kind of feathered up top. Um,
I still
an
don't like the
updated,
the
yeah,
big chunk missing in the neck. You know what I mean?
yeah. It's not. Yes, I agree. I'm okay. I can see past it sometimes, but it's not make or break for me. But I totally
Yeah.
understand how you feel that way.
And I wouldn't say it's make or break for me either. I just if I had a preference,
Yeah,
But
you would not want to be missing a giant chunk out of the neck.
no, no.
Hmm.
Weird, I know.
Um, speaking of preferences, I
Some
am
people call me picky.
I am happy about the Mosasaurus being
Yeah,
brick built,
I am
but
too.
I'm also sad that we're only gonna brick built one. Maybe we'll get a molded one, but I know the price to part ratio would be ridiculous. Like, I mean, they would probably value that thing at like $50, and like a 200 piece set would probably be like $80, and
It'd be
people
like
would be
that
mad.
whale from Avatar. That thing was like huge.
Well, it was kind of brick built, only the head wasn't.
Yeah, I guess that's
So,
fair.
yeah, but
I
it looks good. It looks
Yeah,
good.
I think it looks really great, and I don't mind the larger dinosaurs being brick built. I think there's something really there that I really liked the T Rex in the vignette that they made for the T Rex escape with the
Hmm.
Ford Explorers in it, and I just really like that, and I like the even bigger T Rex too. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, at that larger scale, they're able to capture quite a bit, but I'm excited for that mosasaur because it's very compact, but it seems to really capture the creature really well. So
Yeah, what I like about the molded ones is just they just feel more polished, but
yeah,
they also feel more like a toy. So I don't like that part. Like it still needs to feel like Lego, and somehow these do to me. So I
yeah,
don't. Maybe it's a double standard. I'm just okay with it. But like I didn't like the mutant T Rexes and mutant dinosaurs that they did. Like those felt a little too fake.
yeah.
So I don't know.
It's interesting, right? Because Lego has a weird history with the dinosaurs, and you and I are
Hmm.
familiar with this because we, right as Jurassic Park 3 was coming out, we were kind of in our heyday of our Lego sort of timeline as kids. And so we bought all of the Dino series that had the kind of original toy dinosaurs in them, including the original Spinosaurus. And those ones were okay, right? They left a little to be desired because they took a really similar mold for like the body and the head, and then they just made like variations on them. Some of them worked better than other ones did, but they also had like those brick built raptors. And I know we've joked on it on the podcast before in the like studio set, and they just looked so goofy, and it didn't
Yeah.
capture because they had like that smile on their face, and
And then they
it,
reused the same head for the
yeah,
Brachiosaurus and the
yeah,
pterodon or pteranodon. Sorry, like
it didn't capture sort of the menace of the raptors from that movie. And so when you saw them like all put together like that, it was a little silly. So I think that was maybe a good example of where like the brick built dinosaurs left a
yeah.
lot to be desired, right? But I think this mosasaurus makes up for it in a lot of ways. So I think that's really cool to kind of come full circle on that and sort of be excited about a brick built dinosaur now.
Hmm. I speaking of getting excited about weird brick built things, what do you think of the Transformer brickheads?
I think they're really cool. They captured the curves of the bumblebee in sort of a really comical way, which I
Yeah.
think is sort of one of those things that Brickheads does really well. I think the Optimus Prime looks really great too. Brickheads is funny because it's such an interesting medium. I mean, they rightfully so. I think people compare them to Funko Pops, and I think that's like a good comparison. But
What?
believe it or not, but I think they are able to capture like this whimsical sort of notion about which whatever their medium is in
Hmm.
a way that I think is really funny. So like some of the ones that I bought that, and I don't collect them, but I was like, oh, I gotta get this one, was like the Luke and Yoda from Dagobah, or the Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian one. I always thought that the small Yoda critters were kind of funny. And then I didn't get the Gimli one, but I kind of feel like I need to go back and get him because just the small versus like the large scale of them,
Yeah.
I think is kind of funny. I think it's
That one
hilarious.
is retiring soon, if it
Oh,
didn't already retire. I'll
well,
look it up while you yap.
maybe I learned my lesson. Maybe I did not. So I think those are fun. I'm curious to see if we get more Transformers. I believe we had some sort of hint at maybe another Transformer set this summer. So it'd be interesting to
Yeah.
see what they do next. Do you know what I mean? So, but what did you think of them?
I like them. I was more into the brickheads when they first came out, and then they kind of stopped coming out, so I kind of stopped
Yeah,
getting them, and then I kind of started collecting other stuff in Lego, so I didn't. At the time they were only doing like random holiday and animal ones. I was kind of like, meh, I don't really care for those. So I had stopped, and then they're back in full force now. It
yeah,
seems
yeah.
just as strong as they were when they were like oversaturated, and I really like these. I remember the Blue and Owen Grady brickhead was the
Hmm.
first time we got a non-human brickhead in blue before Star Wars anything, any alien or anything like that. And this is definitely the first time we got a car, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like a vehicle exclusively.
Right, right.
So
Do you think they'll do Fast and the Furious brickheads with like a Dom and a Charger and like
no,
a Nissan
no, but
Skyline and a Paul Walker?
it'd be funny too. It'd be like a C3PO or an R2D2 in brickhead form,
Yeah, I'm
which
surprised they haven't done that yet.
like the C3PO would look really good, although maybe also really weird. And then I obviously with the R2, I think they'd have to decide, are they going to make it more rounded, or for like the Baby Yoda, they did kind of a pretty rounded pram, the floating kind of cradle thing that he
Mm-hmm.
has. So I could imagine the R2D2 being a little bit more rounded. The new kind of build your astromech droid series kind of, I think, hints at what that could potentially look like. But I was thinking about this actually, and I will raise you one that I think would be really fun in brickhead form. And maybe we'll get this
Raise it.
sooner rather than later. A Maui and Moana. Because I think Moana would look great. You know, you could do like a wreath kind of crown on her head or something like that, which would be really fun. But the Maui would just be like really big and like, you know, kind of awkward for the brickhead form.
Yeah, I
It
wonder
would
if they would
almost
like break the scale for
it
that. Because
would
like
almost
with
be like a
the
Hulk brickhead. You know what I mean?
but it's not any the only difference with the Hulk brickheads is that his arms, instead of using the little clips, they use like the 2x2 circle brick. Like that's the only difference. So like it's
Oh yeah.
the brickhead itself isn't bigger.
I'll have to go look to see. I don't. I guess I didn't think they did a Hulk one. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it
He
would
was
be
one of the
interesting.
original lineups.
Okay. They probably
And with
haven't
the
revisited it, have they, since then?
no, and then with the avatar, like the blue people avatar, they
They
just
made
made
him
their legs like
taller. Yeah.
a brick taller, but
Yeah.
that's it. So
That'd be fun to see. So
yeah.
I think a Maui would be a good one, like a good Disney one.
Well, I have bad news for you, West.
Oh no.
The Gimli and Legolas has
Oh
retired at
no.
the end of the year.
Oh.
And the good news is it's available secondarily on the secondary market.
Oh.
Um, the more bad news is that it's $35-$40, so twice the price. So
No.
sorry.
That's okay. You know, when a set doubles from $20 to $35 to $40, I'm okay with that. That's a lot more palatable than like a $200 set doubling in price.
True.
So, um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that means like my own scale of worth for Lego is maybe a little skewed towards my own self interest. But when is that not the case for people, right? So,
You'll have to see, maybe they have them at like Barnes and Nobles? That might be the place.
oh, they might, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
or like Target or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if they sold them at Target. Are those direct to consumers?
No, I don't think they are.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'll explore.
Explore away. All right. So that's a wrap of the news. Let's go ahead and move over to today's topic. Today's topic. All right. So for today's topic, we are talking about Lego Modulars. It's a big topic. Even though there's only 10 sets, there are 20 sets, there's a ton to talk about here. So let's get right into it. This will be the first part of two. West, just tell me about your history with the modulars.
Yeah, I got into them a little later. It
Mm-hmm.
was the Thanksgiving of 2019 when the Parisian restaurant was on sale. It was just about to be retired, and it was
Mm-hmm.
on like a Black Friday deal. And I bought it just on a whim because it looked fun. And this was probably a good year into my kind of reawakening with Legos. Right, I'd just come out of my dark years, my dark ages, and was really getting back into the
It was
hobby.
Thanksgiving of 2018, by the way.
Dang it, you're right. Thanksgiving of
But continue.
2018, and I bought it on a whim, and I built it, and it was just so much fun. And I really took my time with it. I really loved the details with it. And so after that Thanksgiving, I bought the Assembly Squared shortly the next year, and then started just collecting them as many as I could,
Mm-hmm.
with the intent of I knew the Parisian restaurant, and we had talked about this, and I think actually this was something Jang had mentioned in his review of it, but this was kind of a transition for modulars, an inflection point, and where post Parisian restaurant they had really kind of increased in detail and just overall design and storytelling, and I don't disagree with that. And so I said, okay, cool. I'm going to try to collect everything post Parisian restaurant. And so I just started collecting as many as I could. with the goal of eventually getting it to where I would just pick up the one every year. And that's pretty much where it's been. I've loved building them. I do have a little bit of a love annoyed relationship with the modular buildings, and we'll talk about that later. But they're
Okay.
just so much fun to build. So
Mm-hmm.
I know you started getting into them. I kind of have them set up to be a city, although right now they're all in storage, minus the museum and
Tutor.
Tudor Corner, which are in my kind of to be built collection. But Grinch, how about you? What got you into them?
I remember the modulars is interesting because right at the start of our dark age, like that, like our dark age was what 2008ish.
Yeah.
So the Cafe Corner, Market Street, and Green Grocer had just come out, and I never thought about them twice. Like, I mean, they were cool, and I think you're like, wow, these are so cool. Like, look, like we could make a city out of these. And I was like, yeah, girls, I want to be cool. I want to be cool. So we kind of just didn't really engage with them then. But I think it's just cool that like, for me, it was like something that like I kind of like one of the last things I remember about Lego. And then when we got back into Lego, I was like, oh yeah, these are still kicking. And then you got into them and I didn't. And now I'll just say, now I have them all. So whoops.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you remember
Whoops.
this, but when we were young, we had a neighbor who was really into Lego, and he had a
Mm-hmm.
huge city built up. And this was probably the late
So like before it was
90, early
cool.
2000s. And he had actually
Yeah.
more or less built the modulars, his city in a modular style, where each floor separated like the modulars did.
They had a working elevator and
Yeah, and that was always something that stuck out to me, not necessarily some of the finer details, but just how he had organized it so that they did separate like that. So I think in the
mm-hmm.
90s this was kind of something that was existing in lugs in the larger AFOL community. And so I don't think Lego necessarily, at least, and I can only speak to this from what we saw, but I wouldn't be surprised if this idea didn't start with Lego. I'm sure they probably saw somebody do this and they're like, oh, that's a pretty cool idea. Let's see if we can sell these. And then that was sort of the genesis of the line. As we'll talk about it, right? I mean, it kind of
Mm-hmm.
came along in a little bit of a fit in the start. Like it seems like they didn't quite know what to do with the first couple of them. But Grinch,
Yeah, there was 1
yeah,
year where we got 2
yeah.
modulars, and that was the very first year.
So I know
And
this is kind of a open
mm-hmm.
question, but what makes the modular a modular?
Well, West, you tell me.
Yeah. So I what we know, right, and this is through observation and then interviews. So like Brickmaster Jamie has come out and said in like official Lego interviews, like kind of the characteristics about the modular
Mm-hmm.
series.
And the you can watch some of them like the
Yeah.
designer videos on
Yeah.
YouTube.
So some of the attributes of these, right, are this a light gray tiled curb, right, with a one stud width. All of the modular buildings have that. A dark gray sidewalk, a metallic gray grill piece acting as a storm drain that's integrated into the sidewalk, a white lamppost, and that is kind of interestingly a holdover for every single one. The buildings are all placed approximately 7 studs away from the front edge of their base plates. This kind of varies with different facades and depths of the buildings, but generally about 7 studs away. All the buildings go edge to edge of the modulars where they're intended to line up with other buildings. So there's never a spot where the modular is supposed to connect and there's a space. Now, this has been broken in some of the Marvel modular series, famously with the Daily Bugle, right? But it's also not an
Mm-hmm.
official modular. And it had issues with the next kind of note, which is that on each edge, there are 2 1x2 Technic bricks with a single hole in the middle of it, mounted at the base plate exactly at studs 10 and 11 and 22 and 23. And those are the mounting points for connection. And the Daily Bugles actually was just offset just a little bit, so that was kind of an interesting design flaw in that model. And then all the sets before 2018 had just a blank minifigure face with just 2 eyes and a smile, except
No,
for
it's just blank.
yeah, just yellow, plain yellow, except for the Market Street, and that actually had just eyes and a smiley face. Or sorry, wow,
No, they did not just have eyes and
no,
smiley faces. They had mustaches and hair and
yes,
everything
they had
else,
more of a design. There was only 3 minifigures in the Market Street, so
which is so funny.
yeah, but
Although,
they weren't that decorated. So, but yes,
yeah, and Market Street was $90 because
Ugh.
it's like half a modular. Yeah, so everybody, when the Downtown Diner came out, people were mad because for the longest time, they did the classic Lego face in these, and then the Downtown Diner came out and was like, "What the heck?" But technically, Market Street broke that, so it is what it is. And also, those classic faces, as nostalgic as they are, and as awesome as they are for what they are not the best.
yeah,
Like it's okay that we moved on from them, in my opinion, especially in today's day and age.
agreed.
So West, you talked about the Daily Bugle, right? Breaking that, but really the only other kind of exception to the rules is, they all start seven studs away from the edge, and then, they all kind of take their own liberty with, maybe there's some books out in front of it or a little sitting, eating area, as is the case in the Parisian restaurant. But anything that caught your eyes with the rules or anything like that?
Well, they've been really consistent, right? And so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these rules are through lines in all of these buildings. So we talked about like the curb and the lamp. What's interesting is they're all designed. The backs of the modulars are generally designed with something there, but there's still not a lot of detail. It's a back alley, right? That some of them get more detailed than others. There's some interesting adjustments to the inside zone. We've kind of talked about it. There's a little bit of a dollhouse effect. So the walls or the height of each floor can sometimes be adjusted, so it's easier to move a hand into it. But other than that, they've been pretty consistent. Lots of different colors have been used. They usually like to stick to 3 or 4 kind of core colors and then use some accent details there to kind of accent each one. It seems like a new color is sort of highlighted in each modular building when they're released. So that's always interesting to see. Not necessarily a new color to Lego or like the larger Lego world, but kind of a new and interesting color that we haven't seen in a while. So it's always been really fun. There's usually some sort of eatery involved in the buildings, and then just kind of varying degrees of different kind of shops and stores and houses and stuff in each one.
Mm-hmm.
So was there something
There's
you were
only
thinking of, Grinch?
no. Actually, I think that was a good summation. I did pull some theme data here for us. There have been 7 corners and 13 straights.
And so actually,
It goes,
if I may, they
Yeah.
do a corner every 4th set, right? Or sorry, it was
every
third set. So for example, in the most recent ones, we had the Boutique Hotel, which was a corner set, the Jazz Club, the History Museum, and then the Tudor corner set. So
Yep.
So every 3rd set ends up being a corner set.
So if I was a betting man, and as our listeners know, we bet on this podcast, but I don't think you'll take this bet. I bet the next one will be a straight.
I think, yeah, I think you're probably right.
and I'll go double or nothing that the one after that is also a straight.
Oh, I like those odds.
And then you know what? Why not go all the way?
Yeah, do it.
The next one will be a quarter.
I don't know,
after
man.
that. But it is interesting. So the Market Street or the Cafe Corner came out first, right? Then Market Street, then Green Grocer, then Fire Brigade. So they didn't really start this until they kind of got their swing after a few of these coming out. All right, so the most expensive is going to be a tie between Assembly Square and Natural History Museum at $300. The average price to part ratio has gone from 7.2 to 6.8 to nowadays it's, guess what? 7.0, 7.4, 7.9 is actually the highest price to part ratio that was on the Jazz Club. But, the police station was 6.8. So it's actually kind of a cool chart. It looks like it might slightly be trending up, but we're talking about going from 6.9 to 7.1 over time. Like it's not nothing crazy here.
A 2-penny swing.
The other the most notable thing is that the later modulars tend to have more minifigures than the original modulars. So you're also getting more minifigures later on too. So like, is that price to part ratio getting worse? I don't know.
Yeah.
The most expensive one is going to be the Cafe Corner at almost $1,300. The second most expensive will be Market Street at $1,200. And the third most expensive will be the infamous Green Grocer at $1,000.
And that's to buy it new today, correct?
Correct. And they all those three run around 800 used. So people love these and will buy them new or used.
Yeah.
And fork out a lot of dough.
And I just want to correct myself for the sharp listeners out there. I said 2-penny swing. That is not how price per part works. So it was 0.2 of a penny swing from 6.9 to 7.1. So just if anyone's like, West, what's going on? As I mentioned at the top, it's been a week. So
all good. So that was the data that I got. The average price per part ratio is 7 cents and 1/100th of a penny, or 1/10 of a penny. The median is the same. Average minifigures is 5.9, so right around 6. The prices have consistently gone up on this, but so has the intricacies and details of the build. But again, this is really a good argument of like kind of against price to part ratio, because the price has gone up significantly on these, but they also went from a position of not filling out the interiors to filling out the interiors, right? So they don't look bigger over time, and there's more pieces. It's just they're way more detailed now.
Well, they, like you said, they're more detailed, right? So like the facades on the newer buildings have a lot more pieces that go into the exteriors than the old ones did. So I do think the old ones, from like maybe a volume wise, maybe looked a little bigger because so much of the piece count went into just building out a building, whereas now so much of the piece count, like you mentioned, is on the interior of the building themselves, but then also in just like the little intricate details, the plants, the leaves, the ornate details on the columns of the Natural History Museum, and up on the top on the molding, the crown molding of kind of the entryway and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot more parts, but they're being used in they're almost denser. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So, argue for or against price per part ratio with that, right?
And we've seen the last few of them have been expensive, right? I mean, the Natural History Museum was $300. The Tudor Corner was what, like $230, I believe.
$230. So, yeah, $230 is the new kind of baseline.
Yeah.
The Boutique Hotel, Jazz Club, Tudor Corner were $230. Corner Garage, Bookshop, Police Station, $200.
Well, in the Bookshop, remember, prior to that was like $180.
This says $199.
It was changed when.
It got the price increase in it. You're right. It was $189.
So it was cheaper originally, and that was kind of the selling point. Was like, it's a smaller modular, and I know some people didn't like it, but I mean, again, right? It was consistent price per part, so it wasn't really giving you less. But at the same time, it did eventually increase, so you were effectively paying the standard modular price for what was a smaller modular. But
Well, and so 2 more points here of data, and then let's talk about
yeah, sorry.
these bad boys. The Natural History Museum is the highest piece count with 4,014. Also one of the most tied for most expensive with Assembly Squared at $300. The Market Street is far and beyond the least amount of pieces, almost 800 pieces, actually a little bit more than 800 pieces less than the next smallest modular, or I guess Pet Shop is the next smallest, so 800 pieces less, with 1,248 pieces only. And like you said earlier, that came with 3 minifigures and retailed for $90. So I think that's a good segue. We're going to talk about just the first 10 today. So that's Cafe Corner, Green Grocer, Market Street, Fire Brigade, Grand Emporium, Pet Shop, Town Hall, Palace Cinema, Parisian Restaurant, and Detective's Office. And next week, we're going to go into detail about the other 10 and then kind of talk about the future of modulars and kind of wrap our discussion up there. But Wes, let's talk about these bad boys. I'm going to go right back to Market Street.
Yeah.
This has got to be the worst modular, right?
I don't think
nothing against it. Nothing against it.
I don't think that's
this
unfair,
is pretty bad.
This was a weird one because it was part of the Lego creator line at the time, which they all were.
Lego Factory,
that's
advanced
right.
models.
So it was a little different, and it was really sold as like truly modular, right? Which I was explaining the series to somebody today. He was like, "Hey, what are you recording for your episode?" And I was like, "We're going to talk about the modular buildings." And he's like, and I was explaining, and I'm like, "They're modular. Like, you can take the floors off,
like Love Sack, like the sofa company,
right?" And I'm like, "They're not really modular anymore. This one was truly modular, and that you could like not only take the floors off, but you could change the order of the floors. You could change the orientation of them, so you could rotate them 90 degrees on axis." And then, so like what was the front is now the side, for example.
This is really the only one where you could do that.
So this really kind of took that concept of modularity and owned it in sort of an interesting way. I think what was sacrificed is the cohesiveness of the model because it's just kind of all over the place. You can tell there's some inspiration from like some Danish architecture, specifically with the roof. They kind of have like a stair-stepped pitched roof that's kind of very not stereotypical, but common in Danish buildings, with kind of just these little, I mean, I don't even know what you would call them, but pieces that stick out of the roof and kind of make it, kind of really emphasize that stair-step nature of it. Look up pictures of it. It's very common in Denmark. Translates into Lego. It's already a blocky medium. It just looks more blocky. I don't know. Does this one really speak to you, Grinch, as a collector, other than just
I mean, the stairwell is probably my favorite part of it. I don't know.
The stairwell. What a compliment.
Oh God. I mean, I have this one on like the very end because it's kind of just there.
Yeah.
Like this is just the one that you got. I remember I bought all these used, and I told my my wife wanted to build some, and I was like, "Well, I need to build Cafe Corner and Green Grocer, so you can choose between these."
Wow,
she's like, "Well, which one?" She's like, "Well, which one's the one you want to do the least?" I was like, "Market Street." She's like, "Okay," and then she's like, "Okay, I can see why this one sucks."
So kind of you, Grinch. No, it's a tough one. Oops. It's a rough looking one, to be honest. And
it's elementary, right?
Yeah.
It just, yeah.
And the problem is, not only is it hard to look at, and is it rough in comparison to all of the old, if we're gonna call 1 to 10 kind of the OG 10, right? Like the first of them, the first wave, if you will. It's rough looking for the first wave, but if you look at some of those original buildings on their own compared to new modulars, those ones look rough too. And so,
like, you mean Cafe Corner? I think Cafe Corner and Green Grocer still hold up pretty well.
That's where I think our opinions are going to differ on these a little bit. But I think some of them, Some of them I think hold up better than others, but I think, you know, again, Market Street just kind of stood out all on its own as like even rougher than
Yeah.
the rest. So
Yeah. That one is not
yeah,
debatable.
yeah. I'm curious to see if anybody has taken like a modern zhuzhing up of Market Street to kind of see what it would look like through like a modern building lens. Just
Here's the thing with it though is so the original modulars, their interiors were
yeah.
blank. There's nothing on the inside. I think with the Green Grocer, there's a suggestion of a carpet,
That had a
and
first floor
even like
interior, didn't it?
the grocery store,
Yeah.
yes, but the apartments, no. And same thing with the cafe corner.
Right.
It's supposed to be a hotel, but there's nothing on the
Right.
inside.
It's like almost completely blank if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the whole thing, like there's nothing even for the cafe,
Yeah.
and which is super interesting because like the outside is so like, you know, lively and there's people out there and and then you like actually build and you're like, oh, there's nothing in here though, like it's just a green base plate.
Yeah.
So I don't know where this lady with the white shirt is. I don't know where she got that drink.
I'm gonna attach the history of the Lego Modulars link on YouTube. It's an interview, a Lego interview for the 20th anniversary of I don't think it was the 20th anniversary module. I think anyways, it was
Was it the 10th or
it was some
something?
anniversary, and they were interviewing Jamie, Brickmaster Jamie, and he was going through each one and kind of talking about them. And one of the things that stood out to me when he was talking about some of the original modular buildings was how they were designed to be built up and combined. Like you can take two of these and make them even bigger. And that was kind of the original concept of them.
It's on the back of the box.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you get two of them, you can do this. You can mirror it. You can do this. If you get six of them, you can have this giant hotel.
Right. What stands out,
like it literally suggests on the back of the box to get six.
We're not made of money, Lego. What stands out to me though, right, was that when you saw these original buildings, they were relatively simple and they used relatively simple pieces. So not only were they suggesting you could buy more of these sets, it also sort of appeared to me that they were suggesting like if you have a big parts catalog, you could build these yourself, an additional floor or something to that effect. And the fact that they didn't have interiors in them too kind of highly suggests the intent for you to build out the interior. And
right.
so
customize the interior yourself.
Yeah, it just, the simplicity of the pieces. Again, if you look at the new ones versus the old ones, then the old ones kind of look like a photograph that's like a little fuzzy almost. The new ones are crisp and clean.
Yeah.
But the simplicity of the design, I think, actually made, if you go and look at a parts list for an old modular building versus a new one, it's so much smaller with some of the parts that were used, and there's just more of them used repeatedly. I had the pet shop. You actually picked that up for me in Kansas, and it was a used version of the pet shop. And what stood out to me as I was cleaning it and rebuilding it and just kind of playing around with it was you could tell that, like, for example, it used a sand blue 1x2 with that kind of slot in the middle for the garage door in the actual pet shop building itself, the blue one. And that piece was reused anytime they needed just a light blue 1x2. Even if they didn't want to use that kind of piece as a
they did the same thing in Green Grocer.
Extra detail. Yeah. And so that was just so fascinating that it was like, because on the new ones, they would just include two different 1x2s, right? The modified one and the regular one. In the old one, they really tried to keep the piece, not necessarily the piece count, but the number of unique pieces to the set.
Yeah.
Small.
Number of lots.
Right. And so that was kind of interesting to see how that's changed over the years.
Which does help keep costs down, right? Because it's cheaper for them to include 100 of one piece versus 50 of one and 50 of the other.
Right. So
from a complexity standpoint in building
when you look at these original ones, I think that really stands out. Like I mentioned earlier, not only some of the simplicity of the design, but the scalability of each model, and then that care that went into kind of limiting those unique pieces for each build. So, and I think that lends a lot to the buildings and their ability to be scalable from a collector's perspective. But like we mentioned, they lose a lot in detail. And that's where some of the new models are just, I mean, you look at the new Tudor Corner and you look at some of the old buildings and it's just not the same at all. You know what I mean?
Well, let's look. I mean, there was a lot to love in these old ones. We're talking about the new
Yep,
ones
I know,
next
I
week.
know.
Super
Thank you for
exciting.
course correcting me,
But
Grinch.
but the town hall, while it was very rudimentary, did include an elevator.
It did.
Right? And it uses not the same, but a very similar building technique for the front columns that the Natural History Museum did. So you can certainly see, I think when we did one of our test episodes, we talked about how Throwbots, was crawled and scraped around on the ground so that Bionicle could run. I think in this case, some of the, a lot of these modulars were, and I know you love to modify yours, but this is why I don't, because each one of these tells a little bit of a different story in terms of, what they brought to the table. Green Grocer had a first rendition of a bay window, and we see that then a few other times, right? So for me, it's kind of nice to go back and look at that old school, this bay window. Now that we've got really nice pieces, I mean, the bookshop did it in just even a more phenomenal way without that bay window piece, but the Green Grocer was really the first to do it, right? And so I just like to kind of appreciate some of these for what they brought to the table. Going back to the town hall, I really like how the inside of it's fairly open. There's each floor has got its different purpose on it, but then there's kind of the town hall big room. I'm forgetting the name of it right now.
It's like an assembly room, right? Like basically a meeting
the assembly room. Yep. And that's all open to the top, and it just allows a ton of light in. So there's just, in my opinion, a lot to love with some of these older ones.
No, I agree. And some of the things, like the Grand Emporium has like this huge skylight built with these windshield pieces from like the original Volkswagen Lego Creator punch buggy or something like that. It's like a 2 wide, but it's like I think it's even longer than 10, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it is like 10 studs. It's like a 2 by 10, by like, I don't know, 5 or something like that. It's just this really wide windscreen, but very narrow in depth. And they use 2 of them put side by side, and it's connected in kind of a interesting way so that it just sits there. And they look really great. It looks so good on this building. And those skylights let in a lot of great light too.
Yeah.
What's interesting is this original series, like I mentioned with the Market Street, the first 2, the Cafe Corner and Market Street, had a very, and the Green Grocer, I suppose. So the first 3 had a very European kind of angle to them. When we get the Fire Brigade, starting with the Fire Brigade, the Grand Emporium, and really the Town Hall and Palace Cinemas, where we started to get kind of in a North American feel to some of the buildings, right? And so that's where our city started to get a little bit more diverse. And that was kind of interesting to see. What are your thoughts of the buildings that are sort of more traditionally American versus the ones that are European? Do you like them better or no?
I mean, we're from a very historical city, and I feel like in America you have so much European influence anyways that it doesn't, I'm not, when I walk down my modular line, I'm not like, oh my God, I'm in the European section.
Pinkies out, everyone.
In fact, I I kind of had mine set up to embrace that a little bit, because I mean, like, we go to the Parisian restaurant, and that does feel more like a kitsy kind of Americanized European feel because it's called a Parisian restaurant, right?
I think they just call those restaurants in Paris.
Yeah, right. They're not like, oh, this is a Parisian restaurant. like this is clearly not actually in Paris, because they also have like Chez on it. Like, like, so, I don't mind it. I think it adds to it, if anything, because then you got like, the old Chinese theater, right? With the American from Hollywood, right? The famous Hollywood theater. Kind of is
heavily
really
inspires
the Palace Cinema is heavily inspired by the Chinese theater in Hollywood. So it just, it's a way to kind of add some expression, I think, to the city block.
Yeah, I really like it. It's interesting though, right? Because we don't really get anything other than European and North American flavors here. So I would say that's something that I think is missing from the lineup, but I feel like I'm kind of spoiling a little bit of what I want to talk about in episode 2. So let's keep talking about the top. It's so hard to not do that. The original 10, right? So yeah, we got, like we mentioned, some very interesting European feels for some of the buildings. We had some American feels. The fire brigade was the first one, right? It included something kind of unique, which was that brick built American flag that was out front. So I mean, it kind of hit you over the head with what it was supposed to be. And that one was kind of an interesting set. It had, a little bit more of a detailed interior, right, than kind of the last few, and that kind of started that.
It had a detailed interior.
Well, because they put something in it.
Fully. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where it started the trend. I thought it was kind of funny when you get to the pet shop, and I'm not going to say this was like an excuse, but you see in the apartment in the pet shop, what's kind of the brownstone apartment, Lego kind of forgoes a detail interior by sort of pretending that somebody's moving into it. It's being renovated. So it has a very sparse...
Yeah, they got the guy painting the wall, and there's literally like a snot like tile on the wall, and it's just like, this is my paint.
There's boxes upstairs. So I thought that was kind of cheeky. I was like, oh, clever. Cool. But then,
I think the pet shop was not well received and still is not.
No.
For that reason.
And that one struggles. What I would, and as you mentioned, like I personally like modifying them, and I'm still trying to, figure out how to make the pet shop look better. And for me, the challenge with the pet shop is not only the blockiness of the bay window, which was featured in something like the greengrocer, which is why I still am not like over the moon about the greengrocer. But what I really liked about the pet shop and specifically that building was it kind of gave you, carte blanche to do whatever you wanted. And I thought that was really exciting personally, of like, hey, you can build the interior to this one however you want to organize and build it. So
I do feel like Lego's lacking that a little bit these days in general.
Yeah. I think it's still
back in the day it used to always...
It's implied.
Yeah. But back in the day, it was really like, for example, Cafe Corner, right? They're like, hey, if you buy 6 of them, you can do this. If you buy 2 of them, you can do this. Like they don't do that anymore, right? They kind of have like Creator 3-in-1 for that, and that's that's your suggestion, and that's why I like the Rebuild the Galaxy sets that came out this year, because that kind of encouraged that and kind of reminded me of that. Oh yeah, you can create your own thing with Lego.
So if Lego offered a modular next year with a blank interior, would you like that or no? Because I feel like now that we've been conditioned to interiors,
no,
I don't know if I would either. But
yeah,
and I will just, because I said it's still implied, but I think it's like lightly implied, right? Because the details of the interiors now are so detailed, and everything sort of like tells this collective story that if you were to change the inside of one of them, you'd be changing, something pretty significant. And I think that would be kind of difficult for Lego at the end of the day.
Well, it'd be like, well, I don't want to talk about the other modulars, but
we'll get there.
Like you notice with these ones, there's a lot less, like with this first group, there's a lot less secondary stores.
Yeah.
There's the hotel, there's the grocer, like they might have apartments on the top, but like it's the Cafe Corner, which is a hotel and a cafe. There's the greengrocer, which is the greengrocer and apartments. Fire Brigade,
all one building.
The Grand Emporium. Yep. Pet shop has an apartment and a pet shop. Town hall is a town hall. Cinema is a cinema. Parisian restaurant's a Parisian restaurant. And then you get to the detective's office, right? And that's
Parisian had the apartment and then the artist studio, right? So that one kind of set the trend.
Yeah. Well, I'd say detective's office is really the turn to modern, right? Because you got the pool hall on one side, you got the detective's office on the other, or on top of it, and then you've got an apartment up there and a barbershop, right? It's really a little bit more not claustrophobic, but there's a lot more starting to go on,
Yeah.
and that's kind of why like stopping it at 10 I think was perfect. Because for me, I know people say the Parisian restaurant's kind of the start of the new era, but I really feel like the detective's office
Yeah.
was, for that reason, because um, there it's a little claustrophobic. It's a little bit of a maze, right? There's a little alley going down the middle of it. There's kind of stairs all over it, ramps all over it, and I really like the detective's office, but I think that sort of style stuck going forward and kind
Yeah.
of signified the end of what we're seeing in the traditional
It's
modulars.
certainly the start of modulars as like a storytelling element in Lego, right? This was when we
Mm-hmm.
started to see Lego trying to do something more with it than just present a building. In the Palace Cinema, it was sort of implied with the limo and some of the characters that were included.
Oh my god, what a terrible limo, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really the only way to slice that one is as not good. But
Ugh.
I mean, you could say it's like a premiere night for the Palace Cinema
Mm-hmm.
in your Lego town or whatever. But
Town Hall had the people getting
yeah, so
married.
there was kind of these flashes of stories, but in the Parisian restaurant, you had the wedding and you had the artist and the chef, and there's a little bit more going on there. But like you mentioned in the detective's office, that's when they really leaned into the storytelling aspect of these buildings, and it really all came
Mm-hmm.
together to include what was effectively a mystery of like who was the guy making you know who was the smuggler.
Who's Ace Brickman?
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of funny to explore that a little bit, and you could see like the smuggling routes from underneath
Mm-hmm.
the barbershop into the pool hall. And I think it's originally cookies and candy, with a few translucent yellow tiles. It quickly becomes beer or or something else. You can make it kind of more compelling if you want to, you know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, I want to go back and talk about the fire
Yeah.
brigade really quick, because this is the first one where we saw a vehicle with a fire truck, and I love it. And I think that fire truck still stands up decently to today. It's very simple,
Yeah.
but it's it's kind of
Classic.
simple
Yeah.
good, right?
I
Yeah.
think I saw it at your house this Christmas, and I
Mm-hmm.
actually, if you recall, I think it's better than the one that's included in the Fire Company, the holiday series, the Firehouse. I just think
Mm-hmm.
it looks more complete and kind of on its own. They're both old fire trucks from like the
Right.
1920s, but I think this one just looks a little bit better myself. So yeah, I would agree. I think that one's a classic design, which is so funny to see that vehicle, and then we get the Palace Cinema.
Oh god, dude,
And it's just the
it's so
the
bad.
limousine, yeah, it's just way out of place. And if I recall, there's no roof, so it's like all open,
Mm-hmm.
and the hood of it's kind of squat. It looks almost like it needed to go up one more layer, like level of like tiles. Like one
Oh
plate
yeah.
higher would have made it in line with everybody, but it's like low, so it looks like somebody sat on the front of it almost.
What was it called when you get the really big rims on a car and you have like a really small bodied car?
Oh, like donk, where it's like, yeah,
Yes, yes. It's like that, but with tiny
yeah,
wheels. Like it just looks
yeah.
disproportional.
Kind of like the
It's
lowrider
just
scene in like
bad.
California, where like the
Yeah,
wheels on the
except
cars are
for with like
tiny.
really tiny
Yeah.
wheels. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and since then the cars have gotten better, right? And we'll talk about that in our second part. But I think they've
Mm-hmm.
gotten. I still have some issues with them, but they've gotten a lot better. So
Do you think cars are necessary for modulars?
I don't, and I think they kind of not only are they kind of sponges for piece counts a little bit, but I also think I think that takes away from some of the fun. And part of that is I like collecting like the speed champions, and I'm like, that Lamborghini is going to go into my city. because I think that's kind of a neat way to feature some of those vehicles. So I just don't think the modulars need to have vehicles per se. The bicycles, the mopeds, I think are all great inclusions. Those bring life to the city. I don't know if I need the tow
Mm-hmm.
truck or the limousine,
Fire
you know.
truck. I think the fire truck is the only real necessary
Yeah,
one because the front of it opens, right? There's the front garage
right.
part, and you want to make sure you have a truck that kind of adequately fits into it. And at least in my, city um lore, this is an old fire station. Like the new one is down the street in the suburbs and it's like state of the art.
Yeah,
This one's here just for open houses and like, there's a couple old dudes that volunteer there sort of thing. Like it's not the main feature
right,
anymore.
right.
And that's kind of how this feels, right?
No, or yeah, that it's the truck that they're going to use on the July 4th parade or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
Exactly.
I think that's kind of a fun way to sort of sell the challenge, or not the challenge, right? But sort of what is effectively an interesting dynamic of like buildings from different eras that are all in the cities. And speaking of that point, right? They've never quite pinpointed the era of the building. We kind of know that the European buildings are set. We know they're sort of all set in the 1900s. That's been pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
Some seem like they're older, like the fire brigade and the town hall. Some of the American ones do seem like they're a little older. The
Well, the fire brigade has the date on it.
Well, fair enough, right? It's 1932, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
That could just be when the
Very
building
good.
was made, right? So not necessarily the
Right.
year it is
True.
currently, but that
Well,
does
yeah.
date the building. So that's a fair point. So
And town hall is 1891.
right. So we know some of the buildings are older, in some of the more modern series and sets there we'll talk about on our next episode. They do have sort of features that sort of indicate, an era to them, but people still use typewriters in 2022 and 2025. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's an old set, or an old period or set in an older period.
I will say those are some details that I miss, from these older
Yeah.
ones where they have the date on the building,
Yeah.
right?
That is kind of
You
fun.
don't you don't really get that in any of the newer batch. And really Town Hall was the last to do it.
Well, not only that, but then the detective's office was the last one to feature brick built lettering, right? I mean, even
Right?
in
Well, diner.
okay, fair enough. But what I will say, what was unique about what was captured in the town hall, or not the town, man, the detective's office
Detective's office.
was it Joe or Flo? Who was the name of the barber on it, right? But it was done in a way so that the pieces were actually
Al's.
Al's. It's clipped
Also
in,
very similar to
right?
Joe.
Joe, Flo, Al's.
Al.
Yes. But they're clipped in, right? So it's actually two studs deep, the image,
Mm-hmm.
or not the image, but the writing. And that's the same in the pet shop too. And that was kind of the last time we saw something like that, which I'm not
Yeah.
disappointed on, because that was a lot of depth to devote to just effectively a brick built sign, which looks great, but also still is a little clunky at the end of the day. What I think is fun is you see people modify the pet shop and they'll turn it into like food, or like, soda or beer or something like that. And they'll do different versions of it, which I think is kind of neat. But those were kind of the last versions of something to that effect.
So I think you brought up a really interesting thing there because you don't. I think it's unique to these older ones. You don't really see it nowadays. But like you were just talking about, taking the pet shop. A lot of people, or I've seen a lot of cases where somebody takes the pet shop and they make the brownstone apartment, I don't know, greenstone, and the pet shop, instead of sand blue, it's sand green or another, white or
Mhm.
another color, right?
So
And
color
you
swapping.
see that with the Grand Emporium, you see that with the Green
Yeah.
Grocer, you see that with the Cafe Corner, but you don't really see that with the newer modulars at all.
No.
And I don't know if it was just when these original 10 came out, like people just that they wanted more, and now there's 20 of them, so it's like I've got plenty, and more so before of like, oh, I want to build the city, I need to build this out, so here we go, here's the template, or what.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the last time anyone really suggested color swapping was with the museum, the Natural History Museum, where some people weren't as big of a fan of that olive green that was used to make up the building of it. I know,
And that was more because people didn't like the
right?
color
But some
versus.
people, and you'll find images online of them swapping it to tan or to white because they believed that looked
Mm-hmm.
better. I know there was some challenge and consternation over the colors in the jazz club, but again, nobody swapped them. So I think, yeah, you're right. Like the pet shop, especially, is one where we see a lot of different variations on it that I think are really fun. You do see the bookshop, the apartment in it, swapped every once in a while. It's kind of like I think you can see somebody who's done like a Painted Ladies series. So they've taken that apartment or building and they've done it a few times and swapped the colors and kind of arranged them like the famous apartment buildings in San Francisco, where not only are they all different shades of color, but they're done kind of in a very steep, they were built on a very steep road, so they all kind of step their way up the hillside.
Okay. um Interesting. I've definitely seen what you're talking about, but I'll
Yeah,
have
I'll
to look
send that
for
to
it
you, and
more.
we can talk more about it when we talk about the next 10 on our next
Yeah.
episode.
So one last one I wanted to talk
Yeah.
about that we hadn't talked about too much is the Palace Cinema.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I love the Palace Cinema, and I it's interesting. A lot of the modulars are interesting because like some of them really aren't that expensive on the secondary
Yep.
market. For example, the Palace Cinema is one of them where it retailed for $150 and you can get it for 300 now, or like 250 used. So I mean, like I told you at the beginning, Green Grocer goes for 1,000 times.
Yeah.
This is only 200, right? Like this is literally twice versus 5 times.
Yeah.
So it's definitely one of the cheaper ones to get secondarily. So is the pet shop is like literally $100 more than retail new, and that's pretty old. So there seems to not be, some of these aren't as big of hits as others, and I really don't know why the pet shop, or sorry, the Palace Cinema isn't. It has stickers in it,
Right.
which I believe this is the only modular with stickers. Um, but I do really like the window has mystery on the monorail as like a movie.
Yeah.
It's got the brick separator, and it's got this like evil like Trogdor like brick separator like attacking people. Forever sorting as the title of the rom-com. So there's just some fun kind of
Like Lego connections.
Legoism
Yeah.
that goes in,
Some
yeah, that
deep
goes into
cuts.
this. The inside leaves a little bit to be desired for sure.
Yeah.
And there's the one theater in it. Maybe that's why people don't like it, but I really enjoy the Palace Cinema.
This is one that I struggle with, to be frank, because I love the concept of it. I think the execution of it is really good for the time, but in my mind, it leaves a lot to be desired in the modern modulars kind of format. And there's a few examples here, right, that I'll give you. One is the limousine. It feels really out of place and is very jarring, even in the set itself. It
It's
it just
terrible.
it really is, and I'm not trying to like be mean to the designer or anything. Like it really feels
The limousine is terrible,
like it's an
and you
afterthought.
know it, designer.
Yeah.
My guess is they had like 80 pieces, and this was the best thing that they could come up
Yeah.
with.
it leaves a lot to be desired. When you get to the inside of it, like you mentioned, the inside is a little wonky. There's the first floor is effectively like the ticket counter and kiosk. That's where they get like popcorn and stuff. That's done in a very basic kind of setup,
Mm-hmm.
not too uh, basic for modulars at the time. But again, compared to the Parisian restaurant, which we got just 1 year later, that interior had so much detail with plates and the sink and the chef cooking and
And I think that's why people say that's the start
yeah,
of modern modulars, because it's a fully
yeah.
detailed tiled floor
Yeah,
situation.
this Palace Cinema really kind of harkens back to the older modulars where they were getting detailed, but they still weren't super detailed to the extent that the Parisian restaurant was, or fully detailed, if you
Yeah.
will. You go up to the next floor, and that's where the actual cinema is. And there's like 6 chairs. And then
Dude, it's a private experience, my man.
I think,
Tickets to this bad boy are literally a hundred
yeah, for real,
dollars
right?
because you have
To
like
keep
you have to
to keep it
they
running.
gotta make their money's
Just
worth.
the
Yeah,
neon on the
that's why
outside of it
Lego.
costs that much to run every night.
That's why they only have $100
Yeah.
bills in the set.
I think this is probably one of the first modular buildings where it presents scale as a challenge. I would argue the town hall probably does the same, to be honest. I know you liked the assembly room, but it's so small.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where you sort of realize you're like, man, I can fit only like 5 Lego people in here. And that's the
Yeah.
city assembly. Like it just in my mind leaves a little bit more to be desired. And that's where I think the town hall kind of falls short is you get to the point, it's a cinema, so you get to the point of building out the movie screen and you're just like, this is it. And so
Yeah.
I think that's where it struggles. And then to kind of just like finish up my kind of hot takes on the Palace Cinema.
Cinnament.
Yes, exactly. You get to the roof, and the roof is done in a way that's supposed to invoke like terracotta tiles. And so they used the rounded brick piece, the 1 by 1 rounded brick piece, stacked on top of each other. And they're dark red. I don't know if they vary in color. I don't remember.
Yeah, they have a couple regular red and I think one or two brown.
And that looks really nice. But then it matches up to effectively a 1 by 8 plate. And it just really breaks it
Mm-hmm.
up in a way that, if you look at like the modern Ninjago cities, for example, they have some really interesting ways that they try to recreate that terracotta roof look that I think could probably be like really nicely employed in the Palace, like a more modern take on the Palace Cinema. It was almost ahead of its time. That doesn't fix the
Yeah.
scale issue of the interior. I don't know how to fix that.
Dude, it's Lego. You can't be a stickler for scale. You just can't. You'll
Yeah,
drive yourself
I
crazy.
know,
That's where I'm at,
and I
anyways.
hear you, and I think even if you're,
I mean, you just were okay with the Orient Express having a 2 stud wide door. You said, "Oh, it's totally acceptable here."
I know I
Why is
said
this
that in
any
the
different?
opening, didn't I? I think you've got to, when when the scale is the thing you come down to, I think there's cases where you're willing to make not exceptions but forgive, and then this is a case where I just can't forgive it.
Hmm. For me, this is a case where it's like totally okay. It's not like a speed champion car, and like the bumper isn't like comically larger than the back.
Yeah.
Like it's just kind of itself in its own world, and it's not going to hurt you, West.
Well, I'm glad you told me it's cheaper because that might be one I throw on my radar just to kind of
There you go.
watch
You're
because
welcome.
it is a fun set, and you're right. Like
Yeah.
I think the things that really stand out are, like we mentioned, just those really deep cuts of kind of the really clever movie titles, and and it does have a sense of nostalgia of kind of back in the day when movies were more of a to do and people got dressed up,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's really fun. So I think it's a nice inclusion in the city, and when you have all of the buildings right combined to kind of tell like a larger story, we know the designers think about the previous few buildings when they build a new building, and so I think it's a fun inclusion in the city ultimately to have a theater for people
Mm-hmm.
to go and visit, right?
Well, and not that I hope, I definitely do not hope that this happens, because I will talk about it more next week on like the future of modulars. But I do really think of all the ones we've covered, the Palace Cinema specifically could benefit the most from like the
Oh,
Natural
yeah.
History Museum treatment of like a two base plate wide, or sorry, base plate and a half wide version. Because then you could have two really distinct theaters up top.
Mhm.
You could have a theater, you know, in the on the first floor, and like a more built out, or even like an arcade on one side, a larger concession, and then a ticket box in the middle, sort of thing. I think that extra space would go a really long way with something like the Palace
Mhm.
Cinema. And then you could also get more I think the corner maybe wasn't the right
Yeah,
choice,
that's kind of a tough one.
because this was definitely an era before they were even doing larger modulars, right?
Yeah.
Like and so I see why they did it on a corner. But I think if you could go back and be like, we can either do a corner or a 1.5 base plate wide modular for this, I think it would really benefit from
So
that.
there's a few things that stand out for me, and I've got a couple of points I'd like to make here. One is, imagine with me, if you will, the front of the
I'm
Palace Cinema
imagining.
with the entrance, and then that takes up, you know, maybe a 32 by 32 inch base plate, right? Is your standard base plate. And so maybe we say it takes up, I don't know, 10 to 12 studs, and you make it deep. And that's where your ticketing and your concession stand is. And then on
Mm-hmm.
either side is a theater. I think that
Yeah.
would be really cool. And you make them so that they're deeper on the 32 by 32, on
Yeah.
that 16. So you could have it kind of stepped up so that they walk in, and the side facing the front of the building is the screen, for example, and then you kind of build up, like a little bit of like a stadium seating, like you would see in a more modern theater.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be kind of neat. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be
I
fun.
think it would really, and I hope they don't start redoing modulars. That'd be
Yeah.
terrible.
So I've got 2 points there, because you've said, because
Okay.
I think this is an interesting question. If you could expand a modular in this series of 1 to 10, what would it be? And I actually would suggest expanding the pet shop, because we've had, now this is the first of what will be two modular buildings where on the standard 32 by 32 inch base plate, it's actually two 16 by 32 inch base plates,
Mm-hmm.
16 by 32 stud base plates that they put together. I think it would be really cool to see three of those 16 by 32s on there. And you have three distinct buildings that you could rearrange in any single way. And so I don't know
Sure.
what it would be, right? We have a pet shop, we have a house, we have a second house. I don't know if you would want to include another store,
Coffee
a,
shop.
a coffee shop, right? That would be fun.
I think that'd be the easiest. Yeah.
Um, a convenience store would be kind of neat. We already have things like a bank, so that wouldn't necessarily be, but something smaller and more focused would be kind of an interesting inclusion there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe that's where you would do something like a noodle restaurant or something, or because we had like the small little pizza parlor next to the jazz cafe. So anyways, I think you could find some really unique things, or maybe it's like like a boutique, like clothes store or something like that, um, next to the house. I think that could be really fun.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be a neat idea. The next question I'm going to ask you to kind of complete this thought is, because you kind of hinted at it a little bit with Palace Cinema, if you could just like magically pick one of these sets to be like modernized, which one would you want?
Hmm. I'm gonna throw out the Palace Cinema, Parisian Restaurant, and Detective's Office, because I feel like they're fairly modern
That's
already.
fair. Although you could still pick
I'm
one of
also gonna
them.
throw out the Fire Brigade. I'm throwing them
Okay.
out. I'm also throwing out the Fire Brigade because for the same reason. The town hall could also benefit from being a little bit bigger, because it is the town hall. It's the tallest modular,
Mhm.
but it's no longer the widest,
Right.
right? Um, hmm. I would say, Grand Emporium.
Okay. Nice.
And I feel like because it's just kind of
Yeah.
plain, and they again, it's one of the like earlier ones with details on the inside, but it's very lackluster. And I just feel like there's more that they could do, and there's more that they could add, kind of like they did with the Cafe Corner, the boutique hotel, where it's like they're both hotels, but they're very
Hmm.
different, right? I think you wouldn't have to remake the Grand
Right.
Emporium, or you wouldn't have to modernize it. You could do a Plaza Shops
Yeah.
in really Ninjago City that thing up and have separate distinct shops in
Hmm.
it, but it wouldn't have to be a giant mall, right? So that would be my vote.
I
What
I
about you?
famously really like the Grand Emporium.
Famously.
I know I'm gonna say famously because we talked about our top 5 Lego sets, and this was one of
Hmm.
mine where I thought this set really stood on its own.
I know. I thought it was a typo. I was like, "Did you mean to put the Grand Emporium?" You're like, "Yes," and I was like, "Okay, okay, you roll with it, bro."
No, I think the facade of it is really clean. It's a style that we've seen duplicate. We haven't really seen it duplicated in modulars. I think the Brick Bank famously kind of did something a little similar, but we haven't quite seen anything that done in the same style. And I just think it really stands up well over time. It like you mentioned, the interior is really blank, so I'm really kind of mentioning the facade. It's so clean. Um, but this one to be modernized would be really fun because I could just imagine what the inside of that thing could look like. I
Hmm.
almost would like to see the Green Grocer modernized because that building is a really unique looking building. And with the bay windows, I'd love to see the Lego designers tackle the bay windows because I've really struggled
Hmm.
to tackle them as I've been kind of playing around with some mock building myself. And so to see something like that redone, I think would be really special. And especially to get some more sand green pieces because everyone knows we could use a few more of those.
Because there's nothing exclusive about the Green Grocer other than the instructions and the sand green 1x6s and 1x2s garage
Yeah,
pieces.
yeah.
It's crazy how expensive those are. Crazy. All right. Well, I think that wraps up the first bit of our modular discussion. As I'm sure the listeners could tell, we were holding back a little bit just because there's so much to talk about here. We really like the modular. So we'll definitely, of course, we'll be back next week like we always are, and we will finish our discussion on modulars. But let's go ahead and head over to some brick mail. Brick mail. West, what do we have first here for our brick mail?
Yeah, so our first brick mail comes from Zev. And he writes, "Hey Grinch and West, hope this isn't too long to feature on the next show." And Zev, I guess we'll see. He says, "Love the podcast so much. I've been making my way through all the episodes while at work and on my commute, and they've all been great so far. I really enjoy hearing your perspectives and opinions on things Lego is doing well, and I agree pretty much with all that you have to say this past episode. I personally don't have the budget to get sets with gift with purchases, but I appreciate hearing your opinions on it. One thing I wanted to mention in regards to what one of you said about how Lego should have pre-made collections of trees where you can just click to get those pieces from them. Funnily enough, last night I came across this link. It's a Lego website link, Adults Welcome article, Pick a Brick Flowers. That has 5 collections of custom flowers that you can download instructions for and add the pieces to a Pick a Brick online. There we go. I didn't even know
Yeah,
that. So
I didn't
thanks,
know that
Zev.
existed. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm actually hosting a local adult build night for my friends and acquaintances in my area this week, and we're going to be building mock botanicals using my bulk collection. I've been loving the official sets so much that I've been trying to make all sorts of mock ones myself, which is how I came across that, trying to get inspiration. I thought you might find that interesting as another way of turning adults that are interested in Legos more into AFOLs. Most of the people coming don't have many bricks of their own or only have them at their childhood homes, and so I'm trying to reintroduce them to the hobby. I also have at least one episode suggestion: buying Legos on a budget. Talking about parting sets out, getting pre owned sets at independent stores, getting eBay auctions, and going to garage sales and such. I currently don't have a huge budget myself, so for example, I built the UCS Razor Crest mostly using pieces I had, but didn't bother getting the specific pieces with stickers or the minifigures. It still looks awesome. And congratulations on the new baby, Grinch. I'm glad to hear the baby
Thank
and
you.
mother are doing well. By the way, I also appreciate the humors you guys incorporate into the episodes. Keep up the great work on the podcast. Sincerely, Zev. Zev, thank you so much for writing in. I think the adult kind of build sessions that you're hosting sound like so much fun. So, keep. I just think that's so cool. So, congrats on kind of starting that up and hosting those. I think that's a great episode suggestion. What do you think, Grinch? We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but I don't think we've talked about
Yeah,
it directly.
we actually have a similar one on our books already, which would be buying used Lego, and I think it'd be really easy to tie some of those concepts into it because part of buying it used would be buying on a budget,
Right.
And just remember your budget can be anywhere from $1 to $1,000, right? So it's just about making sure you can get the most out of that budget as well. So that's certainly one way. It's getting pre-owned sets.
Absolutely.
And thank you for the well wishes, Zev. And I love the building of the community that you're doing.
Yeah.
All right, so up next we have Doc Man. He says, "Hey guys, first of all, hearty congrats to Grinch and Mrs. Grinch on the little builder. I hope all is going well. Thank you, Doc Man. Last 3 episodes briefly. The Star Wars one with Mavericks, great fun listening to the competition. It did make me glad that I'm not a serious Lego Star Wars collector, such a slippery slope. I do own the Ewok Village, though.
Oof,
2 planes. Great job, Solo West. I didn't even know some of those sets existed. Nice review, and your perspective as someone working in the aeronautical industry provided some excellent insight." And then 3, what Lego could do better. I agree with so much what you said, and we'll add one more. I think Lego Insider program is a mess. They're trying too hard to be too many different things to people. I mourn for the old VIP days when I would check out at the Lego store and be told I had 1,000 points and then asked if I'd like to use them. Insiders is so confusing. Plus, when I've ordered something from the Insiders page, I receive a code via the email that I can only use along with the future purchase and cannot be used in conjunction with other codes. And the email doesn't indicate what product the code is for. This goes along for Lego's failure to fully support AFOL community. As you discussed, Lego could revamp the entire program simply to make it more user-friendly, maybe with input from actual AFOLs. I have to confess that as I was writing this comment, I decided to visit the Insider page. Still very messy, but I ended up ordering the baby girl encounter. You just can't go to the Lego website. Trying to stay away from politics, but I have some angst about Lego and impact of the 25% tariff on products from Denmark if the country doesn't willingly hand over Greenland. Keep up the good work, Doc Man. Well, thank you, Rob. And as I said in my email response to you, yes, I don't know why a country wouldn't willingly just hand over another country. So yeah, there's definitely some angst as somebody who buys a lot of Lego. Spending 25% more on it would be terrible.
Well, Lego, we like Denmark, so
yes,
big
we're
fans.
Pro Denmark.
Yes,
yes,
and their territorial sovereignty over Greenland.
Yes.
Well, thank you for writing, Doc Man, too. And I think that point about Lego Insiders is pretty spot on, Grinch. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's funny. Anytime I go to like the website to try to get the code, I always forget like how I got there. I'm always like insider points. I'm like, no. I just want to go redeem the code. It's like, do you want to redeem for like cool prizes? I'm like, I just want to redeem it for the dollars off.
The only thing that they've done better now is, and they started this January of last year of 2024, and or at least that was the first time somebody at the Lego store told me I could do this. Was he's like, we can actually just use these points and just take it off, like.
Yeah, they will do it for you at the store still.
Right. And so you don't have to convert it into like increments of $25 here in the United States. And then, they will just take it and it'll be however much money it comes out to is how much you'll get.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nice. And I don't think you're like losing out on anything, for example.
Right. Yeah. So I think just ask because there's been times where they ask me and there's been times where they don't. So it might be employee specific, but just ask at the register.
Yeah.
It makes it so much easier.
But something you can't do online. So at least I don't know as of
you definitely can't do it online. But I do think now there is like if you're on the product description page, like if you're on the product page, you can I think I've seen it where you can, but maybe I just made that up. I'm trying to go there really quickly. Do you want to read the next one? The next brick mail?
Yeah. So our last brick mail was
Yeah,
from
wait, sorry
Zach.
to interrupt. You can literally just hit use now
Oh, there you go.
and it just get like it's on like when you're at your cart, go over to your order summary, you can hit use now and you can hit get a discount and then you can choose the increments that you want. So like for example, I can go up to $16 it says right now.
Yeah. So that's nice. Nice.
So they have made some improvements.
Yeah. But I think the overall sentiment about just
Correct.
kind of the messiness of the program is a little leaves a little to be desired. So our last brick mail is from Zach K, and he writes, "Hey guys, I just listened to episode 40, 5 things Lego could do better, and appreciated your framing of those things as constructive criticism to make Lego even better than it already is. I think it's so important to remember that Lego is a toy, and while there's a very strong and active AFOL community, Lego can't always be perfect. That said, there's something I've been thinking about lately that I'd like to share and hear your perspective on. About a year ago, I began emerging from my dark ages and started going through some of my childhood sets and purchasing new sets that I thought were interesting and wanted to collect. I've been growing my collection and building sets from many themes: Star Wars, Friends, icons, ideas, creator, and more. However, sometimes I find myself getting overwhelmed by just how much Lego is out there. Active and retired sets, mock builders, Facebook groups, Reddit threads, Instagram pages, conventions, YouTube reviews, etc., and how I can't keep up. Many of these sets or minifigures that I'd like to build and collect quickly become out of reach either because they retire or I can only spend so much money on Lego. On a similar note, sometimes when I get a new Lego set, especially when they are gifted, it can feel like a chore to get around to building them. Sometimes I'll start a set but won't pick it up again for a few days or weeks. In any case, I was just wondering if you have ever experienced Lego fatigue and if you have any suggestions for maintaining a positive relationship with this hobby I love. I love the podcast and appreciate your hard work in creating such great content for adult collectors and enthusiasts. Best, Zach. And Zach, boy, oh boy,
Oh boy, do we have the podcast for you.
if you go back and listen to one of our former episodes, and Grinch, if you want to pull up specifically which episode that is for Zach, if you don't
Oh
mind.
bro, you're putting me on the
I
spot.
am. I am. We actually talked about this. And so we spent a good chunk of time talking about Lego collection fatigue and our own strategies for tailoring our collection and setting boundaries with Lego, just so that we continued to feel not necessarily, you know, not to keep like the same sort of degree of a relationship with Lego from a hobbying perspective, but just to sort of level things out a little bit more. So we were kind of eliminating some of the big ups and the big downs, if you will. And while that might sound like, you know, kind of like the role of well, effectively, we are just trying to control our relationship with the hobby, right?
Yeah.
And that I think is really big. And I know both Grinch and I have felt those moments where you buy a set and you're kind of almost feel a little bit of guilt and you're like, what am I doing?
Buyer's remorse, yeah.
Right. And then, you go back and or you haven't built in a while and you build one and you're like, man, this is so much fun and this is why I got into this in the first place. So Grinch, I don't know, any thoughts for Zach outside of what we've already kind of talked about in our collection fatigue episode?
It's episode 12
There we go.
from
Thank you,
May of
Grinch.
last year. And no, I think that's a real normal reaction for me. And I think I said this in the episode. It's been almost a year. I have ADHD, and one of the symptoms of that can be like getting really hyper focused on something and like getting really into it really quickly, and then like forgetting it like the next day, just being like, I'm done with that. And so for me, Lego was the first hyperfixation that I had that, well, I'd say my wife is also hyperfixation, but that and Lego are the two that like didn't stop in my life where like, I didn't wake up the next morning and be like, I'm done. I'm done with Lego. I never want to touch it again. I always went back to it. And I do think though that's really it's really healthy to take a break from it. Don't feel guilty about that. And I'd almost say that's good because then when you come back to it, you almost feel more appreciative of it, or you enjoy it more because it's less of a friction. It's not supposed to cause friction in your life, right? So I think that's my 2-minute quick answer on it. We go into that in more detail in the actual episode. But overall, I mean, I take breaks with Lego all the time. There'll be, I know we do, what are we building? There's some weeks where I don't build anything, and that's okay. You don't have to. There's some weeks where I build like way more because I'm just like, I'm really enjoying it in the moment. I have more time to do it, and that's okay. That's okay.
And Zach, I would leave you with one last note, which is if you ever kind of need a moment to just not reevaluate your relationship with Lego, but kind of give you a solid pause and allow you to evaluate the collection you already have, move your house. That's a really great time to sit there and go, why am I moving all of this plastic?
Don't move just to do that.
Sell your house just to reevaluate your relationship with your Lego hobby.
If you're burnt out, there's nothing better to do than move.
Yes. That is the AFOLs Welcome gold standard suggestion.
That'll show them. Just pretend like you're moving.
Well, that's fair.
Because you don't have to move. And that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to this show. If you'd like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at AFOLsWelcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye.